Welcome, you've come to a quiet place now. A space beyond the flicker of candlelight, away from the rustle of day, and far from the press of urgency. Here, we drift slowly through the pages of the past, not to awaken the mind, but to calm it. Not to stir excitement, but to soften the edges of your thoughts until they melt like snow under mittens. This is not history told for drama. It is history told for stillness, for sleep, for the slow, soothing rhythm of forgotten days lived long ago. And tonight, our journey takes us far north, beyond the edge of familiar maps, beyond the warmth of the hearth, beyond the reach of ordinary time, to a place ruled by quiet, the Arctic, a vast whiteness, a land that hums with nothing, where explorers once walked in silence, where wind and ice and memory are all that remain. We begin as all good journeys do, with a single footfall on frozen ground. Imagine yourself waking in the dark, not the night dark of a bedroom, but a deeper dark. A dark that presses against the canvas of your tent, a dark that has lasted for weeks, and will last for weeks more. You do not know the time. You cannot see the sun, but you can feel the cold. It is not sharp, not biting, not cruel. It is simply there around you, inside your clothes, settled into your bones like sleep in the joints of an old house. You are an Arctic explorer, one of the men who came to map the edge of the known world, or perhaps to find a fabled passage, or perhaps simply to endure. The ground beneath your sleeping mat is packed ice, covered by caribou hides. You curl your fingers inward. Your breath fogs and hovers before your face like a slow-moving cloud. All around you, the stillness is complete. Not silent exactly, but hushed. The creak of canvas. The faint crackle of ice expanding under your boots. The soft exhale of another man sleeping beside you. And then the ritual begins. Your fingers, stiff and red, tug at the laces of your boots. The leather is frozen. Everything resists you here. Everything requires coaxing. You crawl from the tent slowly, one limb at a time. Outside, the snow glows faintly blue in the reflected light of the moon. Or is it the aurora? The sky dances above you in slow greens and ghostly whites. Curtains of light like spirits drifting silently between stars. You don't look for long. Staring too long brings a kind of madness. You move instead toward the kettle. It is frozen solid. You must chip the ice, add snow, begin the process of melting, of warming, of surviving. Meals are meager. Salt pork, hardtack, tea brewed over a sliver of flame. You have long since run out of fresh vegetables. Scurvy lives in the corners of your gums. But it's not so bad yet. Everything must be recorded. You press pen to paper with a hand wrapped in wool. Your ink sometimes freezes between words. Your journal, once crisp and orderly now, smells faintly of oil and cold mold. But still, you write. The need to document remains stronger than the cold. And so you write, temperature minus 34. Light wind from the east, ice pack remains unbroken. Spirits low, rations conserved. You pass the days checking instruments, measuring nothing. Watching for changes that never come. The horizon does not move. The snow does not shift. And still, each hour must be lived in full. When you relieve yourself, it must be done quickly, carefully. The exposed skin burns. You learn to be efficient. Every second matters. The dogs huddle together under canvas covers. Their breath steams and they twitch in sleep. Their paws moving as if dreaming of running somewhere warmer. You envy them. In the evening, there are stories, or perhaps only silence. There is little to say after months of cold. Jokes feel brittle. Laughter breaks too easily. The men speak less now. Their voices are quieter, not out of fear, but from weariness. The ice does not need noise, and the ice listens. Sometimes, in the rare clear hours, you walk to the edge of the ridge, just beyond the tents, just far enough to hear the ice breathe. You do not believe the earth is dead. You believe it sleeps. You believe the white world around you is waiting for spring, for change, for something else. You place your hand on the frost-covered rock and close your eyes. It is still, but not empty. And when you sleep, wrapped in layers of furs, the dreams are simple. Warm rooms, bread, letters from home. And always the ocean, open, blue, ice-free, a thing of memory. You drift into sleep with the creaking timbers of a frozen ship in your ears, and the knowledge that tomorrow you will rise again to melt snow, to measure air, to write, to wait. The year is 1845. Imagine now the gentle clinking of porcelain against polished wood, the polished decks of a ship moored on the Thames, the salty air of the dock mixed faintly with coal smoke, uniformed sailors moving with tidy purpose. A ship's bell sounds somewhere in the distance. Another expedition is about to set sail. The mood for the moment is hopeful. 2 ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, no strangers to ice. Hardened, reinforced, and freshly retrofitted for Arctic endurance, their hulls black and bold. Their cargo loaded with coal, instruments, preserved foods, and men. Over 130 souls in all. Sailors, officers, engineers, surgeons, and Captain Sir John Franklin. Their commander 60 years of age, silver-haired, experienced. All of them destined for the ice. The goal was ambitious, but not new. The Northwest Passage. A waterway through the frozen channels of the Canadian Arctic that would, if found, link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. A shortcut. A path through mystery. But the Arctic is not a puzzle to be solved. It does not yield to charts or instruments or confident maps. It waits, and it watches. They left England in May of that year, spirits high, journals hopeful, supplies well stocked. The Erebus and Terror made their way westward, past Greenland, past Baffin Bay. In July, they were last seen by a passing whaling ship in Lancaster Sound. After that silence, the years passed, and the Arctic held its secrets. You may imagine the cold now, but there was no true preparation for what awaited them. Sailing north into an ice maze, the ships became trapped in the frozen waters of Victoria Strait. Not for days, not for weeks, but for years. The logs record, wintered in the ice, no sign of thaw. The sun disappeared. The wind screamed across the hull. The temperature fell below 40 degrees below freezing. Inside the ships, lamps burned with seal oil. Frost grew along the beams. The men rationed their food, salted meat, canned soup. A delicacy at first, but monotony set in, and something else, something unseen. The lead in the tins began to seep. It's believed now, quietly, that the canned food was tainted, that the very innovation meant to preserve life slowly poisoned it. The symptoms were subtle at first: fatigue, stomach pain, confusion. But the effects spread like ice beneath a snowbank, slowly, invisibly, and irreversibly. One by one, the men began to slip into illness, into confusion, into death. And still, the ships did not move. Captain Franklin died in June of 1847. His passing was not recorded in poetic prose, but in a cold note tucked into a cairn. Sir John Franklin died on the 11th of June, 1847. Expedition continues under the command of Crozier and Fitzjames. That message would be one of the last known documents written by the crew. After that, the trail fades into mystery. Imagine now, months later, the decision. The ice would not release the ships, and so the men abandoned them. Over 100 men, already weakened, frostbitten, and malnourished, stepped onto the ice. They dragged lifeboats filled with supplies across frozen plains. They marched south, hoping to reach land, hoping to find rescue, hoping to outlast the Arctic. They never returned. The 1850s brought search parties, dozens of ships, years of attempts, desperate loved ones petitioned the Admiralty. Queen Victoria herself took interest. Eventually, relics began to emerge: buttons, silverware, human remains. Bones scattered along the coast of King William Island. A boat discovered on a sled, abandoned mid-journey. Dozens of boots. A tattered book. Nothing conclusive. Just fragments. Just echoes. Whispers grew. Rumors drifted through Victorian drawing rooms like smoke. Cannibalism? Madness? Ghosts of the ice? But the ice offered no answers. Only silence. More than 160 years passed. And then, in 2014, in the frigid waters near King William Island, the HM Cerberus was found, intact, preserved by the very cold that had claimed its crew. 2 years later, the terror surfaced sitting upright on the seabed, almost eerily untouched, as if waiting still for its captain to return. Inside were plates, boots, charts, a desk. Time suspended beneath the sea. And so the story lingers, not just of loss, but of routine in the face of it, of boots laced. Journals written, meals eaten, instruments read. Every day until the last. They did not go out in panic. They went out with structure, with order, with discipline, even as the cold took them one by one. And though the ships are still resting now beneath silent waves, the story continues in soft tones, in documents, in relics, in bones, in the quiet hush of ice. The Arctic does not welcome. It offers no soft meadows, no lush forests, no gentle breezes. Instead, it presents a vast whiteness, unbroken, silent, eternal. And yet, for thousands of years, people have not only survived here, they have thrived. Imagine yourself now, standing on the wind-packed snow, the horizon a curve of light. Above you, the aurora begins to stir delicate greens and purples like brushstrokes across a black canvas. Below, quiet life continues. Long before maps and compasses pointed toward the north, the Inuit had already shaped their lives around this unforgiving land. Not against it, but with it. Theirs is the knowledge not written in books, but carried in stories and gestures, in quiet repetitions passed from hand to hand. You cannot read it. You must live it. Let us begin with light. In the endless dark of winter, the Inuit crafted lamps kullik. They called them shallow stone bowls filled with seal oil. Along the edge, a line of Arctic cotton or moss gently lit. The flame danced low and warm, giving heat, light, and comfort in one. A soft orange glow amid the endless blue. Women tended these lamps carefully, trimming the wick, feeding the oil, coaxing the flame like a trusted companion. No harsh light. No flickering glare. Just a steady glowing hush. The snow itself became shelter. Contrary to what you may believe, an igloo in ineptitude is not crude. It is architectural wisdom. With hard-packed snow blocks cut by a curved knife, a dome rises in elegant precision. The entrance is low, keeping wind out. The ceiling is high and curved, allowing warmth to circulate. Inside, temperatures rise above freezing, even as the world outside drops to deadly lows. You can almost hear the silence in one, the muffled quiet of snow walls, the gentle breath of sleep, the soft crackle of lamp flame. Inside, families eat, talk, and rest. It is not luxury. It is sanctuary. For food, the Inuit turned to what the land offered, not grudgingly, but skillfully. The sea provided seal and fish. The ice, narwhal and walrus. The land, caribou and migration. And every part was used. Bones became tools. Skins became parkas, sewn with sinew thread and delicate bone needles. Even snow itself became a navigational aid, as Inuit travelers read wind-sculpted drifts like others read maps. No waste, no excess. Just what was needed, and what was respected. Travel was not haphazard. Without compasses, the Inuit navigated thousands of miles with a quiet brilliance. The stars told some stories. The wind, others. Snow formations, drift patterns, the behavior of animals all offered clues. They could remember the curve of a shoreline from a single journey. They could draw maps on a piece of wood, carved to match the subtle undulations of a coast. And yet, they traveled not as conquerors, but as stewards. The land was not something to cross. It was something to listen to. In the summer months, the sun refused to set. Daylight stretched endlessly across tundra and ice floe. During these times, hunting intensified. Tools shifted. Canoes, light and silent, skimmed open waters. Here, too, ingenuity thrived. Take the comic soft boots made from sealskin, often lined with moss for insulation. They were light, quiet, flexible. Not clunky like modern gear, but attuned to the foot's movement. Snowshoes, too, were woven with deliberate thought, wide enough to spread weight, narrow enough to maneuver. Even children's toys taught survival. Miniature sleds, doll-sized harpoons, tiny drums. Through play, children absorbed the rhythm of life. They learned to observe, to wait, and to craft. You might be tempted to call this life hard. And in some ways, yes, it required constant awareness, adaptation, and a certain peace with death. But it was also life filled with rhythm, with community, with the comfort of shared knowledge and mutual need. Elders held memory, hunters held skill, women held warmth, children held songs. And though modernity has crept northward, through fur trading posts, through colonial policies, through satellite signals, the wisdom remains. Quiet, but alive. There are words in Inuit that cannot be translated easily. Words for snow and all its forms, for the way light behaves on ice, for the feeling of stillness before a storm. These are not just words, they are maps, they are poems. They are instructions for how to see the world, and perhaps how to survive in it. So, as we drift in this cold narrative, remember the silence is not empty. It is full with meaning, with method, with generations who knew how to listen. Where the Franklin expedition faltered, the Inuit endured. Not because they conquered the cold, but because they understood it. Far away from the ice, far from the brittle winds and the silence of snow, another kind of world ticked quietly forward. Victorian London neatly gloved, carefully clocked, swept clean each morning and fogged again each night, watched the Arctic from a distance too vast to truly grasp. And yet, it watched. It speculated. It whispered. It waited. The drawing rooms of Mayfair and Belgravia were warm. Not because of central heating, no. That would come much later, but because coal fires glowed in tiled grates. And because thick velvet drapes soft the edges of winter's chill. Gentlemen gathered, not around fires so much as around maps folded, framed, or pressed into leather-bound atlases. They peered at the edges, where the ink grew sparse and the labels read not with certainty, but with hope. Uncharted, unknown, presumed open passage. The Northwest Passage, a myth wrapped in scientific ambition. A dream frozen into imperial ambition, and somewhere out there were ships. British ships with British officers, flying British flags, and they had not returned. You can picture the scene. A library in Kensington, walls lined with books bound in calfskin and gilt, a decanter of port, the slow clink of glass. A globe slightly too small to be useful, spun absently. I say Franklin's been out over 2 winters now. Indeed, perhaps he's found the passage. Perhaps he's overwintering again. Or perhaps a pause. They've made for Siberia. No one says aloud what they're all beginning to consider. That the silence means something. That silence in the Arctic is rarely benign. In the club's white spoodles, the Athenaeum conversation meandered around exploration. Not with fear or even with sympathy, but with the comfortable distance of men whose own boots would never tread the ice. Did you hear Crozier's name in the Gazette? Gone with Erebus, I believe. A fine man. Good breeding. A pause. A sip. Will they send another ship, do you think? Oh, certainly. Several, I imagine. Lady Franklin is quite insistent. Yes, Lady Franklin. In parlors where women sat beneath oil portraits and pressed flowers into their diaries, Jane Franklin wrote letters, dozens, hundreds, to lords of the Admiralty, to members of Parliament, to journalists, to sea captains. Her handwriting grew urgent, her tone more insistent, but always within the bounds of propriety. She did not rant. She appealed. She reminded the Empire that its sons were out there. Frozen, perhaps, but British. And Britain did not leave its own behind. Meanwhile, the newspapers spun their wheels. The Illustrated London News featured engravings of icebergs, vast, sublime, drawn by artists who had never seen them. Ships wedged into frozen straits, brave men silhouetted against pale skies. Readers stared, tea in hand. Boys reenacted scenes with carved ships in garden puddles. And still no word. As years passed and silence stretched thin and sharp across the Atlantic, the public's fascination deepened. But it also shifted from hope to mystery, from rescue to recovery. It became something romantic, tragic, poetic, a story, a legend. The Arctic was unknowable, and so the men lost to it became larger than life, frozen heroes, monuments in snow. But even as the upper classes speculated over port and pudding, others watched the same story unfold from a colder seat. The print sellers, the newsboys, the servants folding newspapers into kindling. Their knowledge of the Franklin expedition was not wrapped in velvet and mahogany. It came in headlines shouted across wet cobblestones. Expedition vanished. British sailors eaten by their own. Cannibalism in the ice. The language was not delicate. It was startling, sensational, but behind the ink and the headlines, real questions stirred. Why were men sent so far with so little? Why were their fates such a spectacle? Why did exploration matter more than bread? The contrast could not have been sharper. In one part of London, a gentleman wagered 2 guineas on the return of the Erebus. In another, a mother patched trousers by candlelight and wondered if her son shivering in the Royal Navy somewhere had been sent on such a voyage. And still, the silence stretched. As the Arctic remained still, Victorian London did what it always did. It turned silence into symbol, absence into art, tragedy into tea-time talk. Engravers etched icebergs. Poets wrote elegies. And Lady Franklin grew old, still writing letters. Eventually, evidence trickled in. A note in a cairn. A spoon. A book with a name scrawled on the inside cover. Later bones. Artifacts carried by Inuit who had encountered the last remnants of a crew now long gone. And finally, in the far future, even the ships themselves, Erebus and Terror, were found beneath the sea. But that was long after Victorian London had gone quiet. Long after the drawing rooms had been redecorated. Long after the newsboys had grown up and stopped shouting. Now, as you listen, imagine again the contrast. A man in a fur-lined hood, staring out across an endless white horizon, searching for a landmark that isn't there. And another man in a waistcoat, warming his hands by a fire, discussing that same man's fate as if it were part of an evening's entertainment. Neither wrong, just separate, just distant, worlds apart. In the end, the ice swallows what it must. But stories float on, some told in whispers, some sung in lamplight, some printed and forgotten, and some, like this one, remembered. Even now, even here, even as you drift, your blankets are not snow-dampened. Your breath does not fog the air. No newsboy cries tonight. But somewhere gently the ice still creaks. And somewhere in memory London still listens. Let your mind rest here, in the quiet. Between the hush of snow and the hush of parlors. Between the drawn curtains and the frozen canvas sails, the world has turned. The story is almost done. You may rest now. Now, as the hours drift gently by, As the snow settles around memory and thought, we return one last time to the stillness at the edge of the known world. Imagine yourself there again, not as a hero, not as a spectator, but simply as a quiet presence. Standing where ice meets sky, nothing moves quickly here. Everything waits, everything listens. There's no rush in the Arctic night, only the long breathing silence of frozen time. You have walked through stories carved in frost and buried in snow. You began by stepping into the heavy boots of a lone explorer, crunching across crusted ice, breath warm inside a wool scarf, eyes scanning a sky brushed with aurora. You melted ice to drink. You watched your breath form slow clouds. You checked the sled dogs. You studied the wind. The days passed not with clocks, but with the rhythm of survival, gathering fuel, melting snow, stitching frayed mittens by lamplight, the sound of the sled dragging, the creak of canvas, the scratch of pencil on damp paper. This was life, not in bursts or triumphs, but in the unremarkable repetition of staying alive. Then you followed others further into the snow. A ship iced in, a voyage trapped. You listened as footsteps faded beneath snowdrifts and the daily logs thinned into silence. The Franklin expedition didn't end with thunder. It ended in slow, aching stillness. Rations dwindled, boots were thin, hope cooled, and one by one, men sat down, alone or in pairs, and looked out at a world of endless white, wondering which direction still meant home. But even in that desolation, even as lives were lost, you discovered the quiet strength of those who had long called this land home. The Inuit did not survive the Arctic. They belonged to it, seal, oil, and bone, snow houses shaped by practiced hands, storylines mapped into memory, passed mouth to mouth, fire to fire. Tools not made for conquest, but for enduring. Not for heroism, but for harmony. While others brought maps, the Inuit carried knowledge. While others looked for dominion, they listened to the wind. They waited, and the land let them stay. And then at last, you traveled far not north, but across time and distance, to drawing rooms where fires crackled and tea cooled in porcelain cups, to cities where maps were curiosities, and where explorers were mythologized in the safety of armchairs. There, men made wagers on survival, not because they were cruel, but because they were comfortably distant. Newsboys cried headlines, illustrations sold stories. Society waited while others were forgotten. And now, we return to the stillness. Your bed is not an icebound cabin. Your breath does not fog the air. There's no frozen sea waiting beyond your door, but still that hush lingers. A hush carved into memory, into history, into stories told not in shouts, but in whispers. You have walked gently through it all. And now, let us rest. Think again of the lantern light, swaying gently in a tent of canvas, a kettle warming over seal oil flame, a journal, pages softened with ice melt, filled with looping letters, hoping someone someday will read them. Outside, the stars drift, not just above, but around, in the snow, in the silence, in the past. This is the slow turning of time. The earth doesn't sleep, but it sighs. And tonight, it sighs for you. There is peace in this pace. There is calm in these forgotten corners. History does not ask you to solve it. It only asks you to sit beside it, to listen, to imagine, to rest. So now, drift. Let the rhythm of snow against canvas lull you. Let the fading sound of boots on ice echo just once more, then grow quiet. Let the final page of the captain's log turn. Let the wind settle. Let the past go on without you. You are not needed there anymore. You have walked far enough for tonight. You have listened long enough. You have been still. You have remembered, and now sleep, gently, deeply, warmly. Let the hush of history carry you home. Good night.